Hey, it's Teta time. Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about adding fractions and subtracting fractions. Okay, so let's think about if we have this problem right here. Let's say we have 3/5 plus 4/5. Well, these are pretty easy. So we got two ways we can go about it. We can draw a model where we have 5 sections and 3 of them are colored in, and then 5 sections and 4 of them are colored in. Well, since it's the same number of sections, we can just put those two together and see that we get 7/5 or 1 2/5. But if we're just adding and we don't want to use a model, remember we have to have a common denominator to add fractions. So we add the bottom numbers are the same, they're both 5. So we move that 5 over, and then we just add 3 and 4. So 3 plus 4 is 7, so there's that 7/5 again, or 1 2/5. So that's easy when our denominator is the same. Okay, but what if we throw a negative in it and our denominator is the same? Let's say we have 7/8 plus -5/8. Well, the denominator is the same, so we can still add the two top numbers, but it's the same rules as we did before. We just move the 8 over, and now we're going to apply our adding integer rules. Okay, you guys remember those? So I have 7 plus -5. Well, my signs are different. So remember, when our signs are different, we subtract the two numbers, and then we take the sign of the bigger number. So 7 minus 5 is 2, and then the bigger number is of course 7, and it's positive. So the answer is positive 2/8. But that simplifies, okay? So you gotta simplify the fraction. So 2/8 simplifies to 1/4. Okay, so that's if we have a common denominator, the same bottom number on bottom. But what happens if it's not the same? So let's say we have 3/8 plus 2/5. Well, if I try the model method, what you're going to notice is that there's not the same sections. I can't put those together. So what we have to do is we have to find a common denominator. So our common denominator is a multiple of both denominators. Okay, so that's a fancy way of saying we're looking for a number that they both have, that when they're multiplied by other numbers, they get that answer. Okay, so 3 and 5, or 8 and 5. Okay, so remember it's 3/8 and 2/5. Well, they don't really have a common denominator outside of when they're multiplied by each other. So we could always do that. So if you don't know one off the top of your head that's a simpler version, you can always just multiply one fraction by the other denominator, and then that other fraction by the other denominator. So the common denominator here is 40. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 3/8 times 5 over 5, because to get to 40 I got to multiply 8 by 5. And what I do to the bottom, I have to do the top. So it's 5 and 5. And then we're going to do 2/5 times 8 over 8. And so what we see is we have 15 over 40 plus 16 over 40. So now we have a common denominator just like we did before. So we add the tops, keep the bottom. So we move the bottom over, so we move that 40 over, and we add 15 and 16 and get 31 over 40. Now we gotta think to ourselves, does this simplify? No, there's no number that can go into 31 and 40 besides 1. So the answer here is 31/40. So remember, let's review right quick adding fractions. You have to have a common denominator. If you have that common denominator, we just apply the adding integer rules to the top if there's a negative. So if they're different signs, we subtract the two numbers and take the sign of the bigger number, or if they were both negative, we would add them and then make it a negative. But then when we don't have a common denominator, we have to find that common denominator. Okay, so I'm not going to give you guys anything crazy especially without a calculator, but you've got to be able to find that common denominator so that we can add the two fractions. So now we're going to talk about subtracting fractions. Now let's talk about subtracting fractions. All right, so it's very similar to adding fractions, except we got that little subtraction symbol. Let's say we have 3/4 minus 1/4. Let's start easy. Well, just like with adding fractions where we had to have a common denominator, the same way with subtracting. I have that common denominator, so I have 4 on the bottom. So I know my answer is going to have a denominator of 4. We just move it on over. And then we do 3 minus 1. 3 minus 1 is of course 2. And so I have 2/4. Gotta simplify the fraction. So 2/4 simplifies to of course 1/2. So that's easy. But let's say we have the other way around. Let's say we have 1/4 minus 3/4. Okay, so if I have a fourth of a pi, but I owe you 3/4 of a pi, it's kind of hard, all right? Because I don't have 3/4 to give you, I only have a fourth. But let's go through it. So we still gotta have a common denominator. So they're both 4 on the bottom. So let's move that on over. And then I have 1 minus 3. Okay, so remember, keep, change, change. So we'll keep that first number the same, change that minus to a plus, and change that 3 to a -3. So now we have 1 plus -3. Signs are different, so we gotta subtract the 2. 3 minus 1 is 2. And then we take the sign of the bigger number. Which one's bigger, 1 or 3? Of course 3 is, and it's negative. So our answer is -2/4, or -1/2. Okay, so as you can see, subtracting, you still have the same rules as we did with adding integers. So I hope you remember those. Okay, I told you they were very important when we went over them. You gotta remember, keep, change, change. A lot of you guys were doing that with addition. Remember, keep, change, change only applies to subtraction problems. Now I could have done keep, change, change from the beginning with my fractions, and it wouldn't have changed my answer at all. So if you would rather do that from the start because you know you gotta do it with a subtraction problem, go ahead and do that because you're gonna get the same answer. Now let's say we don't have a common denominator. So let's say we have 7/8 minus 3/4. So we don't have those common denominators. So we gotta find one. So remember, with adding fractions, I told you you could just multiply the two bottoms. And you can do that here. Okay, so if we did 8 times 4, that would be 32. And so we could do that. But if you can notice, I can multiply 4 by 2 to get to 8. So if I can keep from doing something to one of the fractions, I can do that. Okay, so I can keep that as 7/8 and then multiply the 3/4 by 2 and change it to 6/8. And so now I have 7/8 minus 6/8. Keep the bottom number the same, so I have 8 on bottom, and 7 minus 6 is of course 1. Okay, but if you didn't do that, so let's say you multiply those two, so you would have 28 over 32 minus 24 over 32. Subtract them, so you'd have 4 over 32, which is of course 1/8, which is what we just got. So either way, as you can see, subtracting fractions is very similar to adding fractions. Okay, you just gotta follow those integer rules and gotta have a common denominator. So if you're struggling getting a common denominator, I've got an extra video to help you where I actually write out some and we go through it. But if not, you guys have got this. Teta time out.